Hi, everybody. Welcome to California Center for Technology and Management Education's Making AI Possible. My name's Nicholas Beaudoin. I am an Associate Director of AI programs here, and I am joined by Will Croushorn from Wendy's FreshAi, who's going to get into all great things about things that are happening in generative AI, large language model, large models of all sorts. But first, I want to take a moment to talk about what CTME is. We are an executive education center on Caltech that features best in breed when it comes to bringing different and diverse faculty from different departments, bringing NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory researchers to campus to talk to companies, bringing research labs from our seismological lab to the Center for Autonomous and Systems Technology, where they do autonomous robots and cool flying things, all the way down to how they fabricate chips. And then also bringing in industry experts, such as people like Will, or people that contribute to our programs but have full-time jobs actually building AI on the ground. And so we actually have two courses coming up. The first one is AI for Executives, which is building an AI roadmap. I will be teaching that. We call this a lunchtime course because it's 90 minutes once a week, times 6 over lunch, and you come out with an understanding of what are the decision levers, how do you go about implementing AI blueprints, how do you evaluate that AI is working, and how do you actually move the needle for ROI. And that's really geared towards people at senior management and above, people who are in charge of making AI adoption and AI vendor purchases. The second is AI and ML for engineering and science. And this is led by Dr. Philip Marr, who has a PhD in neuroscience, and he's going to lead you through a 40-hour course spent each weekend on Saturdays, all the way from beginnings of data science through the machine learning lifecycle and how to implement generative AI on the ground. So I couldn't be more excited to be able to offer these courses, but more importantly, you're not here for these courses, you're here to hear from Will. So Will, before we get into FreshAi, I want to anchor the audience on who you are and really the scale of what you're working on. And your backstory, I think, is so tremendously cool that I would love it if you could kind of tell us where the journey started, even if it's not directly applied to AI, because I think the journeys of how we get to AI and make AI possible, if you will, are very, very interesting. So I'm going to hand over the introduction to you.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I'm so excited to be here. So, I have had the most eclectic career path. My undergrad was in foreign policy, ended up doing an MBA, went to film school, moved to northern Iraq for 5 years, and did a startup with refugees. Um, Switched gears entirely, moved to where I am now in Nashville, worked with a tech company doing software development, and then, early 2022, 2023, the world shifted and, ChatGPT released. And I remember this was at my previous company, sitting around the table, it was our CEO, it was our engineers, our developers, and we're all sitting around. And I'd started this think tank. And it was the most fascinating moment because nobody knew what to do with this. And we are all coming every, I think it was like every 2 weeks, we all said, oh, I learned this or I did this. And it's funny and it seems antiquated now, but I remember the first time I put a prompt in I think I was back in the day when we called it Bard. And you get that two-line response. And it was just like, oh my gosh, this feels like magic. I, in that moment, was like, I want to lead. I want to be part of the group that's making the decisions on where do we go with this technology. And, fast forward, I've been with the Wendy's company now for a little over 2 years. And we've scaled one of the largest voice AI deployments in partnership with Google Cloud. So we've handled over 36 million orders to date in the drive-thru. We've learned a lot. And the thing that I'll say through my whole eclectic journey is, I mean, number one, we're all figuring this out. That's why I love conversations with you. Um, but that eclectic background has been such a benefit because, the innovation, the ideas, it comes from like, oh man, what if we treated the drive-through like a storyboard, or that experience of learning a language. Oh man, maybe that changes how we should interact with the agent, or what we show or don't show, etc. And you just never know where those nuggets are going to come in handy. So it's been a fun journey up till now.
So some of the conversations we've had over the past year, you've talked I keep hearing you say this phrase that there's very few moments in human history that are truly democratized by technology. And we tend to see, drives in computation, drives in modern technology as being large enterprise or government driven. But this is the first time in history where customers have been able to get access on day one to some of the most advanced technology. So I'd like to kind of think like, how do you see this drive through as one of those rare democratizing moments?
And I have to say, I speak for myself, not the brand. Get that caveat out there.
Absolutely noted. Yes.
We started with this simple question like, can you handle an order in the drive-thru? There's over 200 billion ways to order our main sandwich, and so just incredibly complex. It's something like 67 trillion ways to order our menu in English alone.
Okay,
Drive,
I gotta stop you there. That's gonna be my next trivia. I'm gonna ask somebody. But can you back up just a little bit?
yeah,
200 billion ways to order
yes.
a single hamburger?
If you think customers, everybody assumes it's just, they assume that your order is normal. The thing that we've learned is there's no such thing as a normal order. There's patterns, there's similarities, but if you figure a mom pulls up, she has kids in the background, they're screaming, that changes context. She's looking at the burger and she says, "I want that. Remove the green stuff. Oh yeah, give me a side of Pepsi." Another example, in the north, they will say, "Give me water." In the south, they'll say, "Give me water." But they mean two entirely different things. In the north, they're probably asking for a bottle of water, and they think, it's probably not great to give them a cup of water. In the south, why would I ever pay for something that's free? And so we are saying one thing, but our intent and the way that we get there is very different. And so drive-throughs are this micro ecosystem of human complexity that, as we put in voice AI, as we've learned the process, it's just exposed how complex and amazing humans are.
Yeah, I always consider myself being the barometer of all things convenient and normal, and I'm plain Jane chicken sandwich and fries. But you've kind of shown that it's more complex than that. But I'm thinking in terms as a technologist, when we
Mhm.
start talking about complexity, we start talking about integration of systems. And we've talked a lot with our guests, be it implementing security on the Gen AI side or implementing new vision based models, but how those interact with the systems. Can you go a little bit talking about what's happening under the hood and what you are allowed to say?
Mhm.
And what are some of the roadblocks that you hit, and what were some of those aha moments that you and your team got over?
Yeah, for us, from day one, I mean, it's pretty amazing to sit in a room with some of the smartest people in the world, and you're all going, "Oh, we've never done this before. Let's go figure it out." We made a conscious decision. We've had really great partners with Google Cloud. The mindset being they're really good at building these models. We understand the business, and so together we can build something really great. Um, and so we've built on advanced model of Gemini, which is for retail, and then we've built our own infrastructure on top of that. So restaurants are really complex. We have headset systems. We have chosen to integrate really heavily using visual UI because one of the things that we're doing a lot of research on is what is the cognitive load? Again, that mo busy mom pulls up. We're doing research on do I show you what the agent should suggest? What do you show versus what do you tell? What color do you use? All of a sudden, you have all of these decisions and levers. And the goal for this is how do we serve customers in ways that has never been possible before? And that's what is really, really exciting for me with what we've built out. And I think there's so many other use cases because like I said in the very beginning, the concept was, can you take an order? We've proven that out. Now it's how do you create experiences that just absolutely weren't possible before this technology? I'll give one example. We've done research with speech therapist. We brought in a speech therapist who stutters, and we realized, customers were complaining that the agent was interrupting too much. And we said, all right, well, what's like more of an edge case? And so we worked with a speech therapist to understand how does this agent, if a customer pulls up and is stuttering, how do we support that? And so we did a lot of testing, a lot of rounds, a lot of hamburgers and frosties. Um, and we were able to learn, oh man, there's these little nuances. The name of the game in fast food is fast. You want to go as fast as possible. However, for certain customers, that's not a great experience. And so we were able to, we were able to test. We did a lot of testing. We were able to deploy this out. And so now, our system is supporting around 10,000 customers a day with Parkinson's or stuttering. And, we still have a long way to go, but it's a much better experience. We can serve them in a way that just we couldn't do at scale before this technology,
And did the definition of what success means start differently when you started your first pilot versus where you are now?
for sure. I think, yeah, initially it was, can you do this? Other brands had tried, and again, just with this sheer complexity and scale, um, now we're looking at these little nuances, literally down to the syllable. Like, what is the cost and the impact per syllable? And how do you the one of the really fascinating things is we've seen the role that friction plays in a customer's experience. The minute something doesn't go right or the agent's confused, it creates this mental block for a customer. It makes them feel like it's a bad experience. And so one of the things that we've been looking at is even tracking the number of times the agent says sorry or the customer says sorry. And so this sorry metric is, we've been able to reduce it by like 60% over the past few months. But what's fascinating is like that is not a metric that we ever looked at before. But
From
now it's just,
I can
yeah,
just think from a debugging perspective, like going through logs is really manual and mundane and boring. But if I could just keyword search sorry and that's the error, that sounds like a clear signal right there.
yeah. And that's been the fun part of this journey is it's, it's yes, building the platform, building the system, building the ecosystem of, and handling data, et cetera. But then it's also, I mean, traffic density or drive-through tip traffic density. Like that's not a term that had existed a year and a half ago. And so like you're kind of building the rails that you're driving on. And this goes back to the very first thought of like, it's such a democratized moment in technology because, I was in New York 2 weeks ago with a couple of big brands and we're all figuring this out together.
Yeah.
And there's been wins, there's been some, difficulties, but it's a really exciting time. Tons of
And
opportunity.
I feel like every year since maybe when Siri first came out in the early 2010s, there's been this dangle of like, yeah, speech to speech models are just right around the corner. You're going to have that instant translation, kind of like if, for those who watch or read Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. I forgot what the name is, but the thing you put in your ear that does translate, universal translation. And
Yep.
I know you and I were texting over the weekend about what's a good application that I can recommend to my folks for translation or things like that. And
It exists.
it's just so interesting to see how far it's come, yet so how far away we still are from
Yeah.
this.
Well, and that's what's been, I was just talking to a friend of mine recently. One of the most interesting things is the insight that you're able to gain from the data, from, understanding. And again, we're getting down to the syllable of like what's creating friction. But what's fascinating to me is two things. Number one, I feel like my or our platforms, our system, it feels like we're in like 1980. Like you see where this is going, you see like, man, I wish I could just query. Like I think there's a day in time where, say you have a recommendation engine and you throw, I don't know, quantum computing on it, and in that moment, Nick, you pull up and it's going, I'm going to query every order ever taken in the history of
Yeah.
all of fast food to give you the absolute best order. Like we are so far from being able to handle like that compute. So I think you see that. But then the other thing is you see these legacy systems and tech debt. And by legacy system, I mean anything that was built pre-2023. Like
Yeah.
anything that was before, these AI tech stacks. And so I think you're going to see this new world where you have these startups where it's a couple of people that say, oh man, I have an idea. we're asking the right questions. We have a team that can just do it. We're using Cursor or whatever, and we're going and building these systems, and we don't have the tech debt of, some of these legacy companies. Like it 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 excites me what the future holds for the
Yeah.
space.
Well, I think even, and you do not need to say anything as a Google customer. I know those GCP cloud credits are always very valuable, but I remember using GCP Dialogflow, right? Maybe around 2023 when ChatGPT is first starting to hit off, and then all of a sudden you have these deterministic rules of creating, I don't know, kind of like standard RPA processes, and now they're introducing LLMs on top of that. Where if you're an RPA company like UiPath or Blue Prism, now have agentic capabilities. It's like, okay, like, well, what does that mean? Is it just words? Is it actual implementation? How do you, I know we didn't talk about this question in our chats beforehand, but how do you look for what is a signal and what is a noise from a vendor? And I'll just say hyperscaler agnostic. A vendor comes
Mhm.
out, pitches the latest and greatest. We'll call it AI Plus or AI Pro. How do
Yeah.
you, as a team members, go through and say, okay, well, I've been their customer for a long time, but how do I know this is actually useful versus,
Yeah.
I don't know, AI snake oil, if you will?
I I spent a lot of time thinking about this. Everybody talks about the AI bubble, and I think that's a very real thing. The beauty is, I mean, we see it in what we were building is like, yeah, there's a bubble, but at the same time, like, there's real ROI, there's real value. A fundamental principle of mine is that I'll use the word fundamental again, that fundamental value or business value driver, that core problem you're trying to solve, that doesn't change if you have teleportation, quantum computing, robots, it doesn't matter. For UPS, their main driver is I need to get packages from point A to point B. It's delivered safely and cheap and it's reliable. Like it doesn't matter what the technology comes in 6 months, that doesn't change. For us, I need to deliver food quickly, reliably, it's hot. In 30 years, I promise you that is going to be a need. Um, and so, if that is the base, then this technology says, well, how do I serve that in a way that was never possible before? An example, what if you could pull up to a drive-through and you could order in sign language? That's sign language to text, that's not something that you see anywhere in the industry right now, but maybe it should be because those are customers that we're not able to serve well right now. So the technology allows us to serve them in a way that wasn't possible before, but to do that core thing that absolutely doesn't change. And so to answer your question, I think that's sort of the barometer for me is like, is this actually adding anything net new? Is it actually helping me drive to my core business case? And if it's not, it's probably just, like the lighter app back from iPhones in 2021
Yeah.
or 2019 or whatever year the iPhone
I,
came out.
I very much do remember the lighter app or the beer app where it had like the fake drink that you and we thought that was all like the pinnacle technological advancement at that point.
Yeah.
I remember like 2009 seeing that. One area that I talk a lot to different companies about is ROI.
Mhm.
I think we tend to, in a way, fetishize that ROI can only mean one thing, and that is just dollars. And I think we see that specifically, like that that dang study from MIT, I say quote study, the 95% failure of Gen AI pilots, not showing P&L value within 6 months. I don't know a lot of projects out there that are trying to show on a pilot within 6 months that type of ROI, but I think that seeing companies fail on ROI and those that succeed is companies are able to take ROI and look at it as key performance indicators. So, like time to conversion or satisfaction ratings or time to resolution of tickets. And what I like about the drive through example is it seems as though ROI wasn't the first thing in your mind. It was how do we take these different KPIs and optimize them and then look at what the downstream ROI is.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about some of those KPIs that you tracked?
Yeah, at a very high level, I get this goes to that core principle of like, if you are serving customers well and you're obsessed with that end customer experience, I have this very strong belief, like if you're doing what is right for them, and it might not be obvious, then There's customers will be loyal to that. They will return. You will see the benefit. We saw when we launched Spanish in the drive-through, we saw a huge benefit to that. We saw an increase in return customers, etc.
Mm.
Because all of a sudden, again, you've removed that friction. You've served me in a
Yeah.
way. It is now easier. You know, an example, if I don't, if English is not my first language, maybe I can order a hamburger. But if I can speak in my native language, then I can add the hamburger and remove the cheese and also add that large drink that I really want.
Yeah.
So because you've obsessed over the customer and meeting their needs and, adding that new resource, whatever, in the long term, that is going to impact your business in a positive way, and
Mm.
customers take notice. So, we track all of the main things I mentioned. Obviously, we're looking at check size and, speed of service, etc. I think that what has, I mentioned the sorry metric. I think the thing that has been interesting in this process is number one, it's funny back, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, everybody was talking about data driven. And I think the thing that AI has shown us is that no company was truly data driven. And the second piece of that is like we operate, and I think this is across industries, we operate on gut feeling. For example, a lot of our crews feel like, oh, well, my crew does a better job of upselling or trying to say, would you like to make that a large? And it's this very strong feeling. But if you actually look at the data that we can now see, crews only do it about 5% of the time.
Mm.
And so the feeling versus what's real. Same thing with the customer experience. Um, at the very end of the order, it takes about 7 seconds for it to submit to the point of sale. Um, and customers feel like it takes forever. But at the very beginning of the order, we were getting feedback of, well, she's interrupting too much. Like she's impatient. Well, we were sitting there waiting for 15, 20, sometimes even 30 seconds before we'll say, hey, just want to make sure, like, do you need anything? And so the perception of the experience as well as the data versus the reality of what is actually happening in the real world are almost always two very different things. And so that has been, a big learning point for me in this journey is like, how do you tell the accurate but real story? Because if you just look at the metrics, you might be missing one of those signals.
Mm. That's really important. I think one of the things I picked up in that, especially with the frustration of ordering in a language that is not your native language. And
Mhm.
something that you and I have talked a lot about in past conversation is both of us started our careers in other countries. You started in the Middle East, I started in East Asia. And we both have stories about the frustrations, but also the humiliation within ourselves of not being able to express ourselves fully.
Yeah.
You had an anecdote about your time in Northern Iraq ordering a cucumber. I would
Yeah.
love to hear that on the air and how that helped you down the road be able to see systems in a more, I would say, democratized light.
Yeah. So, I was in this little Decon, like this little market store. I had just moved to Kurdistan and I wanted one cucumber, which already there's just strange, but it was just me. And so I went to walk in, I tried to order one. I walked out with 2 bags of cucumbers. I have my MBA, like I feel like I'm, relatively smart human, and I can't order a single cucumber. And it was just the emotions. It was so humiliating. And that moment stuck with me. And so as we've been building out this platform, and one of the things that drives me is like, again, how do we enable customers to have experiences that weren't possible before? You should be able to pull up an order in any language, in any way. We see differences, the way that customers order in California versus Miami versus, Virginia, or here in Nashville with all of the y'alls. It's very different, and there's these slight differeces. We have regions that are ice or light ice. There's mustard and ketchup markets. Like there's these little nuanced ways you should be able to just pull up and the system should be able to handle it, no problem. It's the right thing to do. It's the human thing to do. And I think from a business perspective, again, there's reward there. But that changes, starting with that premise, it changes the system that you build. I think you and I have talked about like building a more of a modular system that can just
Mhm.
adapt to whatever their experience is. All of a sudden you're thinking, well, we need to name, uh, you know, one of the things that we're looking at now is customers rarely use the actual product name. They use all of these synonyms. And then you throw in language, in Spanish, customers tend to order around a product. They don't tend to order that thing directly. Those are all attributes that we should be collecting in the data so that a customer can just pull up and order. And so that human stance of just like doing the right thing completely changes both the system that you build, the way that you handle the data, and that end result, that I think over time customers see.
Yeah. I immediately thought like every time I go to it could be Pete's Coffee or Phil's Coffee here in Southern California, I'm ordering a grande. And they're like, what the heck's a grande? It's like, oh yeah, I forgot. What is a grande? Oh yeah, that's medium. I'm sure there's a lot of cases
Product is
like
done
that you
well.
can. So thinking about deploying AI systems, when you are ready to deploy,
Mhm.
what are the indicators that you're looking for? And I'm thinking in autonomous driving, we're still at this very much this merge area where we're looking for, okay, autonomous cars need to perform at the level or better than a human. But the sample size are completely skewed. You hear, oh, autonomous drivers kill X amount versus if you look at the whole population, it's significantly lower. But that tends to stand out. So how do you ensure that the system is performing at or above the level of an actual human who's ordering when the
Mhm.
sample size is so skewed?
Yeah. So, I think you bring up a great example. I think it really depends on what it is that you're trying to do. The stakes are much higher if you're putting a human in a car and saying, all right, go, versus, if we get your order wrong, obviously that's not great, but it's a lot less severe of a consequence. So for us, in one of the really cool things is all of a sudden our drive-thru is now a digital platform. I can A/B test. We can come up with a concept and deploy pretty rapidly. Last week we realized there was this bug where the agent was in Spanish orders. The agent was saying in English, "Thank you, please pull up to the pickup window," but she's saying it in English with a Spanish accent. She wasn't trained on that. It was just a weird quirk. And so, all right, we're able to identify that. We're able to quickly roll out a fix, and it's system wide. Other times they're going, I don't know what the best path forward is. Oh, let's test. Which banner do you use? Which phrasing
Mm-hmm.
works better? And again, this goes to you think you know what the result's going to be, and the data often surprises you. Thankfully, we're at a scale now. We do about 150,000 orders every day. We're at a scale now that we can quickly come up with an idea and test it, get feedback, and go, all right, that didn't seem to break anything or it had this positive impact. Let's go ahead and move in that direction. Um, and so it is as much of an art as a science, but that ability to test is such a game changer. And
Yeah.
the last point there is I think what you're going to see is we did this with online retail. When you log on to Amazon or Netflix, it's very personalized to you, but they're understanding how you're using the site and all of that feedback and then gets fed back into what do we build next. And I think, Amazon's just walkout technology, AI in the drive-through, mobile apps, even, Waymo, like this technology in the physical world, we're starting to get that level of feedback that informs what do you do next.
Yeah. It's interesting how generative AI has added components and taken away components to the standard software development lifecycle. Where, like you said, A/B testing can be done so much quicker, and especially when you have a hyperscaler, you have Google or AWS or Azure or Databricks to help you with that. As we get towards some of these end questions for the audience members out there, please put in any comments or questions into the chat thread, and I'm going to start weaving these into the conversation with Will. So if you work in the area, or if you work with large language models, or if you're just generally curious, be sure to put those into the chat, and we will answer them. So, Will, one question that I know is both near and dear to your heart and mine, and also Caltech and any university, is how can students or early professionals start preparing for the AI job market today
Yeah.
when every single resume you get put in looks identical? What are the qualities that you are looking for in a team member that might be outside the perfect technical resume?
Yeah. No, that's a great question. To me, I'm looking for, well, first I'll say this. There's so much opportunity right now, which is, it's counter, again, it goes against what we feel because the market, the industry, I mean, everything is changing so fast. The things that I'm looking for though are it's deep curiosity. Like there's a group of students here in Nashville that I meet and mentor with, and they are so hungry. They're asking really, really good questions. They're prototyping. They're like, "Oh, I had an idea this morning, and then I went and threw it into Cursor or whatever it is, and here's my prototype. All right, let's iterate on that really fast." And so the barrier, that a student a year ago, 2 years ago, would not have been able to build a fully functioning web app or robotic system or whatever it is. They couldn't have done that in the speed that they can now. The real question is not can you build it, but what are you building and are you building the right thing? And are you doing something, are you asking a question that is unique that no one else is asking? And so, to students, I would say number one, and I say this to my team too, like we don't like get out of the office, go to the restaurant, watch the real world, understand how people are interacting, Nick, even how I met you, like spending time on campus and talking to
Yeah.
students. Those conversations are what have sparked. Yeah, I recently was at Disney World, and like literally the question in my mind is, how do we build like how do you take that I want to go to Disney World, that same excitement, that same level of experience, and how do you create this micro version in a drive-through where, I don't know, maybe you're ordering from your favorite character, etc. But those ideas and that inspiration only comes from getting out the relationships, the asking really good questions. And then I've started doing this thing where one of the questions when I meet somebody, I'll say is like, what are you really curious about? Or what's something you've found interesting recently? And if they can't answer that question, that's a good indicator that like, oh man, maybe I'm going to spend most of my time with somebody else because I want to surround myself with people who are just really, really hungry and curious because again, you're spurring each other on. So it's still too difficult. Like regular resumes in this market are just a dime a dozen. But if you can ask the right questions and then you can prove that, tell your story on
Mhm.
TikTok, on LinkedIn, you're going to be far ahead of everybody else, I believe.
Yeah, we've heard that from a lot of different folks in the past is writing about what you're doing. And it's very difficult to find good writers. And I think that is a very underrated skill that's taught in a lot of technical institutions is especially with Gen AI is like how do you get your ideas across in dare I say PowerPoint? But there
Mhm.
are beautiful narratives that you can tell about your research or about your passion projects in both PowerPoint format and in written format when it does come, to job applications and interviews. Okay,
Yeah.
let's start hitting some of these questions. One very specific question is AI being used in all drive-throughs at Wendy's? Can you talk a little
Yeah.
bit about how it's rolled out and how it gets into a franchise?
Yeah, so I can speak really high level about this. Short answer is no, it is not. I think you see a future across all of the brands in the very near future where, whether you go to McDonald's or Taco Bell or whatever, I think you're going to see this technology more and more and more. I think the difference is going to be how is it implemented? Because there's very large opinions and differing opinions on how to use this technology best. And so, no, at this point, it is up to individual stores, individual restaurants. I will say what's been really fun. You can go and watch. I mean, one of my sources of feedback is I'll just go on TikTok and I'll just watch customers use what went well, what didn't go well, and if you go back and watch even 6 months ago, like where we've come in the past 6 months is light speed. And so I think you're going to see it become a lot more natural in the future. And it's just, it's kind of like iPhones where you're like, I can't imagine not having that. It's so easy. It adds benefit in this way. I think you're going to start to see that across more and more brands.
What are some areas that you're starting to see within hospitality AI being used? Where do you see it working? Where do you see it not working?
Yeah. Again, I see it being slapped on literally everything. Some good, some bad. There's a lot, again, those lighter apps. There's a lot of those use cases. There's a lot of use cases where it's being used for inventory, trying to reduce, the work that the crew is having to do. I think one of the really big opportunities, though, is right now everything, and this is not just in QSR, this is, I think, in every industry, is number one, people don't know what to do with it. And so they're sort of throwing darts and hoping something sticks. The second thing is like everything is very siloed right now. And so, as an end customer, what I do in the mobile app versus in the drive-through versus, my world did not just start when I entered that drive-through. I previously before that went to Walmart or the grocery store or went to the, whatever. And so we operate in systems and everything's connected. And right now the way that this technology is built across all industries doesn't support that. And so I think you're going to start to see that start to shift where it's something that's just alongside you in the
Yeah,
journey that you're already doing.
yeah. Well, that's terrific. And thank you, Jen, for putting QSR there. I was about to go into ChatGPT and be like, what is QSR? Quick service restaurant.
Quick service restaurant,
Um,
yeah.
Perfect. Well, Will, we've come to the natural close. If anybody, whoa, hold on, one more question. Let's hold the presses here. We have a participant saying, do you think interactive systems should be fail-safe or fail-back that connects the user with a human being? Okay, so they give an example. The Waymo robotic taxis will automatically call up someone in headquarters if the car finds itself in a tricky situation. When ordering food, what if a customer mentions that they have an allergy? Should that lead to an automatic human connection? So I guess we're talking human in the loop here.
Yeah.
Love to hear what you say on that.
Yeah, I think right now, yes. I think is there a day and time where you don't need that because the systems are so good? Yeah, I think that day is coming. We're probably still a little ways out. The way that we've approached this is, the agent takes almost every order. But at the same time, there's always a human that's listening. So they're not taking the order, they're just there as a fail-safe. And so that means, if a human pulls up or a customer pulls up and says, I want a crew member, we're going to automatically send that to them. So we're adding something on, we're not taking anything away. Other companies have taken an alternate route. I think it's something like 20% of their orders are actually handled by generative AI, where in the other 80% is actually a human overseas that's taking the order.
Mm-hmm.
That's an approach. But yeah. And again, this goes back to the stakes. It's a much different thing if you're in a car or flying a plane or whatever, and versus in the drive-through. But I think right now we're still in this period where, and there's again, it goes back to the complexities of, we're still learning all of the nuanced ways of, oh, customers do this or this, or oh, that burger's available here, but it's not available here.
Yeah,
Um, but I think you're going to start to see that become even smaller in the days to come.
yeah. Um, Question for me: where do you sign up to be this frosty burger tester that you're talking about going through the drive-through? Because I might have some personal recommendations of some individuals who might be a perfect candidate for that.
Well, I will tell you, we have a new key tag that will get you free Frosties for a year. So number one, check that out. But two, yeah, send me a message on
Is that
LinkedIn
there?
and
There's the plug. There's the
there's the
plug.
plug. But again, I speak for myself. Yeah, send me a message on LinkedIn. I'm literally always looking for feedback on what works, what doesn't. I've probably spent 1,000 hours over the past year in a drive-through. I joke, I'm like, I need a degree in like drive-through science because you know, you go through a competitor drive-through and you're just sitting there analyzing it in a way that like probably no human should, but it's part of the process. So,
Gosh, well, that's gonna be the new end question is if you could get an honorary degree in anything that you spent a ridiculously amount of time in, what would it be? So drive-through specialist, I will put in to every university. Will send an email seeing who will
mhm.
pick up on that.
I
Well, if
appreciate it.
somebody wants to get a hold of you, we've got your LinkedIn here that Jen Garcia has put in. Is that the best way to do that?
Yeah, that's the best way. Send me a message, connect with me. I love, again, this goes back to what we were talking about earlier, Nick. Like, I love connecting with people that it doesn't matter if you're in retail or you're doing AI or, you're doing space technology. Like, you're just never sure where those new ideas and that spark of inspiration is going to come from. So
Yeah.
definitely would love to connect.
Excellent. Will, as always, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for joining Making AI Possible at Caltech CTME. Next month's guest is going to be Dr. Isa Nesmis of NASA Jet Propulsion Lab. He's going to talk about how they're using computer vision on Mars rovers and also implementing large language models to overcome some of the deficiencies within computer vision. So, Will, on that note, thank you very much. Stay warm in Nashville.
Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it. Thanks,
All
everybody.
right.